There are intelligent people who spend their lives wondering why they have fewer and fewer friends. Is it arrogance? Is it a lack of empathy? Or is there something deeper that no one dares to say? What if it's not that you don't fit in, but that you see things too clearly? There's a dark psychology behind the loneliness of brilliant minds, and an uncomfortable truth that explains why the more you understand people, the lonelier you might feel. Stick around, because this changes everything. From very early on, you start noticing something others don't perceive. You don't just hear what people say, but what they avoid saying. You catch the awkward pauses, the smiles that last half a second too long, the enthusiasm that sounds rehearsed. While many stay on the surface, you see past the gesture and get to the intention. Over time, this ability refines itself. You recognize when someone exaggerates a story to impress, when kindness is just a social strategy, when a laugh serves to fit in, and not to express genuine joy. It's not distrust, it's perception. Your mind connects patterns others overlook and builds a more complete, and sometimes more uncomfortable, picture of those around you. The problem arises when you can no longer unsee what you see. Participating in trivial conversations becomes an effort. Nodding out of politeness, laughing out of obligation, or feigning interest starts to feel like a betrayal of yourself. Little by little, you withdraw, not because you disdain others, but because social theater exhausts you. From the other side, the reaction is different. Some people feel observed, even judged, even if you haven't said a single word. There are those who perceive your silence as coldness, your attentive gaze as superiority. Not because you're arrogant, but because you don't offer the automatic validation many expect to feel comfortable. Here a key paradox emerges. You can be respected without being close, admired for your clarity, but avoided for your depth. Seeing too well means not being able to participate in the collective self-deception that sustains many superficial relationships. And when someone feels they can't hide in front of you, they prefer to keep their distance. The truth is uncomfortable but constant. Most people don't fear lies. They fear being seen as they truly are. And when your presence acts like a too clear mirror, loneliness begins to settle in silently, almost without you noticing. When you interact with other people, your mind doesn't shut down. On the contrary, it activates. Every gesture, every silence, every minimal change in tone of voice is registered. It's not a conscious choice. It's an automatic mechanism that developed over time. While others converse without much thought, you analyze the full context. You notice when a response takes longer than usual, when a phrase sounds different from the last, when someone changes the subject too quickly. Your brain interprets these signals as valuable information. You start wondering what you did wrong, what word might have been misunderstood, what part of the conversation upset the balance. This constant state of vigilance doesn't stem from distrust, but from experience. You learned that social mistakes are costly, and that one misstep can completely change the dynamic with someone. That's why you anticipate, correct, adjust. You try to foresee rejection before it happens. However, this hyper-attention has an invisible cost. Staying on high alert consumes energy. Your responses become measured, calculated. Sometimes you speak less than you'd like to avoid saying something wrong. Other times, you force a version of yourself that is more acceptable, but less authentic. From the outside, that tension is felt. People perceive a certain rigidity, a hard-to-define distance. They can't explain why, but they intuit that they can't fully relax around you. Conversation loses spontaneity. What is caution to you, for others translates into discomfort. Thus, a silent circle forms. The more attentive you are to avoid rejection, the more distant you appear. And the more distant you seem, the less others approach. Not because they don't want to get to know you, But because the connection starts to feel too intense, too scrutinized, your mind operates like a security system that's always on. It protects you, but at the same time, it builds invisible barriers. And without realizing it, that same mechanism that helped you survive in difficult environments begins to push you towards a loneliness you never sought. You learn to solve everything on your own. When a problem arises, you don't seek immediate support. You analyze, decide, and act. You don't complain, you don't dramatize, you don't ask for help unless it's strictly necessary. From the outside, this seems like an admirable strength. From the inside, it's a habit so ingrained that you no longer know how to do it any other way. Over time, your emotional independence becomes complete. You manage your fears in silence, process disappointments alone, and celebrate achievements without making too much noise. Not because you don't feel, but because you got used to not burdening others with what's happening to you. Self-sufficiency became your natural way of being in the world. The problem arises in the realm of relationships. Most bonds are built on shared need. People get closer when they feel they can contribute something, when their presence makes a difference. But with you, there's no room for that. You don't ask for advice. You don't show fragility. You don't let on when something overwhelms you. Without realizing it, you send a clear message. I don't need anyone. And even if it's not true, that's what's perceived. Some feel unnecessary, others displaced. Not because they lack affection, but because they can't find a role within your emotional life. This dynamic creates a subtle distance. People don't leave due to conflict, but due to a lack of connection. You're still there, stable, functional, seemingly fine. They move on, thinking they're not needed. And so, little by little, the circle shrinks. The paradox is profound. You can desire closeness and, at the same time, unintentionally prevent it. Your self-sufficiency protects you from pain, but it also limits intimacy. You don't push others away. You simply don't open the door wide enough for them to come in. Being strong all the time has a price, and sometimes the price is that no one stays close enough to see you when you also need support. There's something you don't do, even though it would be easier, pretending to agree just to fit in. You don't laugh when a comment isn't funny to you. You don't nod out of inertia when an opinion seems empty or unfair. You don't adopt tastes, stances, or indignations just because the group shares them. Your internal compass weighs more than external approval. Most social dynamics are sustained by conformity. People feel united when they share codes, references, repeated gestures. That similarity creates an immediate sense of belonging. But you operate on a different frequency. You analyze before accepting. You question before imitating. And when something doesn't resonate with you, you simply don't follow it. This doesn't make you a confrontational person. In fact, you tend to be respectful and quiet. But your lack of alignment is noticeable. You don't partake in collective enthusiasm when you consider it artificial. You don't join group rejection without understanding it. And that distance, though subtle, breaks the group's rhythm. From the outside, it's interpreted in many ways. Some see you as cold, others as distant. There are those who respect you, but prefer to keep you at a certain distance because your presence introduces an uncomfortable variable: authenticity. You don't attack the group, but you don't dissolve into it either. Over time, this stance has consequences. You're not usually expelled, but you're not fully integrated either. You become someone peripheral, someone who is present but doesn't belong. You receive silent respect, but rarely intimacy. Because closeness, for many, requires uniformity. Here another paradox appears. Maintaining your integrity protects you from losing yourself, but it also distances you from bonds based on repetition and custom. It's not that you don't value people. It's that you're not willing to betray yourself to keep them. Being different doesn't always provoke open rejection. Sometimes it generates something more silent, a gradual separation, without conflict, without words. And when you choose not to bend to the group, you accept, consciously or not, the cost that choice entails. You feel more than you express. When someone you care about goes through a difficult time, you notice it immediately. You worry, you think of possible solutions, you look for the most effective way to help. But you rarely say it out loud. Instead of words, you offer actions. Instead of verbal comfort, you try to solve the problem. Your mind functions logically even in the face of emotions. You analyze what's happening, identify the cause, and propose a solution. You believe that's caring. And in many contexts, it is. However, in the emotional realm, most people aren't looking for immediate solutions. They seek to be understood, validated, accompanied. Here, the disconnect arises. While you provide clarity, others expect emotional resonance. When someone shares their pain and receives an analysis instead of explicit empathy, they might feel misunderstood. Not because you don't care, but because your way of showing it doesn't align with social expectations. This pattern often has a deep origin. You often learned that expressing emotions changed nothing, or even made things worse. So you developed another path, feeling in silence, thinking in private, acting without announcing it. Over time, this strategy became automatic. The problem is that affection isn't always perceived if it's not verbalized. Being present without saying it, helping without explaining it, caring without showing it, leaves room for doubt. Others start wondering if you really care. And when they don't receive clear signals, they gradually withdraw. By the time you realize it, the bond has already weakened. There was no discussion, no breakup. Just a growing distance. You still felt the same, but the other person stopped noticing. You're not insensitive. You simply process emotions internally. But in a world that needs constant confirmation, emotional silence can be interpreted as absence. And so, unintentionally, you end up losing connections you genuinely valued deeply. As these traits recur, loneliness doesn't arrive suddenly. It doesn't appear as a big breakup or an obvious conflict. It settles in little by little, in accumulated silences, in invitations that stop coming, in conversations that are no longer resumed. Not because you did something wrong, but because you operate in a way that doesn't always fit with common social dynamics. The clearer you see people, the harder it is to navigate superficialities. The more emotionally independent you are, the less space there seems to be for others to approach. And the more faithful you remain to your way of thinking, the further you move from bonds based on imitation and custom. The truth is uncomfortable, but liberating. You're not broken. Your mind isn't failing. It simply operates with a level of depth that not everyone knows how to handle. In an environment that rewards emotional quickness and constant validation, introspection and authenticity are often paid for with isolation. This doesn't mean you should change your essence to fit in. It means you need to understand the price of certain strengths. Depth reduces quantity, but can increase quality. Not everyone can accompany you, and that's okay. The final question isn't why you have few friends, but what kind of connection you're willing to accept. Because when you recognize your own frequency, you stop looking for belonging in places where there was never any room for it.